Very, very important and special episode today. A couple of heavy hitters in here. Darcy, Ungaro from the Everyday Investor podcast. Mate, it is good to see you, especially out of hospital, but sitting across from both Mikey and myself.
Yeah.
It was a narrow miss, but I made it.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming. What has happened for you to be in hospital, mate? Talk us through that very quickly.
Kidney stones. Wouldn't want to have it. Wouldn't
Yeah.
want to wish it on anyone. 4 millimeter stone. It's out now. That's the main thing.
And I saw that one of your takeaways from being going through that was recommending that people have some form of medical insurance, right?
Yeah. It just so happens that I sell insurance, which is just a perfect segue right
No
now.
plug.
Yeah, a little bit of a plug there. But yeah, I've been reminded of this 4 times now, that the amount of premiums that I've ever paid, not just for me on my medical insurance premiums that I've had for 20 years now, but for my kids as well, it'll just take one claim and then you've covered all your premiums.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. And you bypass the public system, which I sampled twice leading up to the surgery. And like, full respect to all the people that work in the public hospital, amazing people. They're working their butts off, especially with some of the people that go through there. But yeah, the public system versus the private system, if you can go private every day, it just makes a difficult situation.
And that's the
so much
true
easier.
pain point solved. And like you say, no disrespect to those people who work in the public system, but if you're able to take a bit of pressure off that because you can afford to,
Exactly.
then
Exactly.
yeah.
And why not have it a tax deductible expense while we're at it, right? You're taking pressure off the public
Hey,
system.
there we go.
Same thing
not
with
tax advice.
private school fees as well. Take them off.
Who's your
good.
accountant? I want to chat. I actually sat in here maybe a week ago and had a conversation with someone who studied sociology for their whole life. Basically, they were taking me through aging population, etc. And I think when people listen to that, they'll tie what you've just said back to, if I can afford insurance for myself in the form of medical and private, I probably want to be exploring that with the path that the country's going on.
Oh, demographics.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, who's going to actually fund this?
Yes.
It's great now that we have public health insurance, and our parents would probably rely on that because that's what they know. But yeah, by the time we get there, who knows?
Yeah.
Also, I've just, like, as I've got older, you start healing a little bit slower for injuries and things like that, and you start realizing that, like, your time is valuable. If I was 20 and broke my leg, I didn't care.
It'd be fixed by the next week.
Yeah, it heals up good and you don't really care, you know, you just strap it up and...
Couple more line reads and you're fine. Yeah. Hey, do you want to quickly tell us, mate, as well about the Everyday Investor podcast for those people who may not be familiar with that? You've got a lot to answer for, mate, because your podcast is actually responsible for a lot of the pressure I feel inside my household. So my partner was listening and then decided to buy a couple of rental properties. Wow. So yeah, cheers for that. No, she's done very well and learned a lot, but so she wanted to say thank you.
Oh, she's welcome.
Yeah,
She's welcome.
But take us through a little bit about what you do on that side.
Yeah, on that side first. Yeah, so this is probably like the 20% part of my life is the podcasting stuff, aka kind of like the alternative to the mainstream. This is where I explore all of the things that I probably don't fully explore in my mainstream job, but it's about helping the everyday investor walk across a bridge, and that bridge could be in so many areas, like whatever they already know, whether it's just property and they want to walk across the bridge to understand what it's like to invest in shares, if it's shares and they want to walk across the bridge to understand what it's like investing a little bit in crypto, whatever that is, I'm there to challenge them with some ideas, concepts, strategies that you don't normally hear on most mainstream channels. Like, the beauty of podcasting is that that's kind of turned the whole model upside down. Anybody has a voice now, but I've just been quite comfortable exploiting that from a social good point of view. That's kind of like my outreach. I can't see everybody, but I can give, it's not financial advice, but I can give some perspective out there, which I think is needed.
Yeah, from what I've been doing in the Keep the Change space, I've noticed, and I think I've known this for a while, but it's very evident that there's someone who's got $10,000, there's someone who's got $20,000, there's someone who's got $500, $1,000, and they want to know, okay, what do I invest in? What do I do? And the big dogs in the industry aren't going to service that person because there's no money in that, right? And now people are going, well, I've kind of done my thing. I've got rid of my debt. I want to start investing into something, whether it be themselves, shares. And that's where I think there's a huge gap to try and help people figure out, you know, what that bridge is that they may want to cross, and then how to sort of start taking the steps over it.
There's a big gap, and it's growing. There's a really good graph that I can still see it in my mind. But what it is it's a picture of I guess, the financial literacy. As financial literacy increases and the balance of what people have to invest is increasing, there's a widening gap of unserviced people that are willing to invest, but the financial incentives mean that those that are most qualified to provide that advice only focus on those further up. And with the dissemination of really high quality content like this and other podcasts, it means that people are actually way more equipped than they used to be. But there's nobody that's actually providing them the advice, not because they're smart, but because we just naturally need other people to bounce our ideas off. Otherwise,
Affirmation, confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the downside to the information people can now access is that it's probably people have forgotten how to make decisions.
Yeah, totally.
We've become so used to being told what to do that now when you've got X number of banks and now X number of competitors to banks saying, we've got a savings account, you're like, oh, I better compare them all and which one should I use? Not going to change your life. Those things, I used to try those things, didn't really change the needle of my life massively. And so your 80% of your life, what does that look like, and what are the services that you're helping people with that are coming to you?
Aren't you one of the most highly qualified financial people in the
keep
country?
Keep going. Keep going.
Summarise that. Yeah.
You can take a sip from my cup if you need to. Just grab my DNA. 80% of the time I'm a financial advisor, so I have a small practice where I am helping people with their mortgages, their insurance, KiwiSaver, and providing a fee-based financial advice service. And the fee-based financial advice service came out of starting the podcast about 6 years ago, where I had all these people coming to me, and they were in that category of people that either weren't ready for a financial product or they already had it but didn't know what to do with it. And they needed direction, and no one was there to give them advice because either the person that set it up wasn't able to, they were just taking a number, or they just weren't gelling with that person. And so, I built that fee-based advice model, which I think is the future of how a lot of advisors can upskill and increase their revenue. And so that's kind of what I'm working on in terms of developing that business. But really, it's a mainstream financial advice practice where I help people who own a property and they want to sell it, get into the next one. It's the basic sort of dilemma that people have when they're upgrading and getting insurance for their kids. And then they start thinking about their retirement through KiwiSaver. And so that's kind of what I do. And it's all just plain vanilla, like what everybody else does. But I would call myself more of a generalist rather than a specialist, just because I have an inability to focus on just one task and do it really well. Like I'd like to think I do everything that I do really well, but I also know that I'm probably more of I will look at themes and connect the dots and look at the big picture before I look at the small picture in people. And that's kind of, nice. I can't do anything other than that. So I hope that's the right way of doing things, but that's kind of how I work.
It's interesting because I just sit purely in the mortgage space, and you can see, like you say, that's the future of where financial advice is going, but you can kind of see it bleeding in. Like I'll sit down with a first home buyer and we'll talk about it, and I'll say, you can borrow this much. And they'll be like, oh, what if I stop my KiwiSaver? And I'm like, right. You'll hate yourself later. You are making a massive mistake doing this, but they just want to like throw it all away, chuck it into the house, get to whatever they can. And I think, we're forced into thinking about it, and we have to present like the risks, and we can't stop anyone from making their own choice. But I think all financial advice is going to end up as a conglomerate, and you're going to have to, like, I'm going to have all those other
and you kind of want to as well. Like,
for sure, yeah.
Like going back, it would have been very common for the mortgage advisor back then just to, cool, you should actually get rid of your KiwiSaver because then you'll be able to borrow more.
Yeah.
They're looking to the plumber that wants everything to be plumbed in just right. Forget about the rest of the house.
Don't insure yourself. Exactly. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And what's the business called for those who want to find it?
Yeah, thank you. Ungaro & Co.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So just take us through quickly a couple of examples of the sorts of clients that you would help, or what that journey would look like, just so if there's someone listening, they might put themselves in those shoes.
My sweet spot would probably be what I would call the upgrader. They've already bought their home. Maybe they have 2 kids that are preschool, or maybe they have just started and they are feeling that pressure of, hey, the house is getting smaller, we're getting bigger. What do we do now to make the step into our next home?
Yeah.
And so that's quite a well-trodden path for me in terms of figuring out the strategy to buy before they sell, whether they can retain the existing, turn it into a rental, or whether they actually have to sell it. What are the long-term implications of that? That's kind of like where I really dwell the most, because that's usually where people are readjusting everything, like their goals. They're setting their goals, but they're also kind of reconsidering some of the risk management strategies, and they're thinking about their disposable income now that dual incomes are back online. How do we best allocate that towards repaying the debt or investing? Which one's best for us? That's the kind of people that I really enjoy hanging out with. Yeah.
Nice. And do you help them set or figure out what those goals are as part of that?
Yeah, so the financial strategy sessions that I do, which is the fee-based consulting work, is all about that.
Yeah.
It's all about just actually, you start off with your purpose, set some goals, choose your strategy, and then understand the tactics and actions underneath that. And that's kind of what I've been developing off the back of the podcast. And that's kind of like the gateway that I like to onboard people with, because then we kind of have this framework now that they can use independent of me, but they can use me to implement some of that stuff or not. But that's what their master strategy is.
Nice.
It's like a personal life business plan.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that's basically what we do at Next Advisory with business owners, is because often they'll here's all the things they want to happen in business, and we're like, okay, like what do you
cluttered pile?
Yeah, and you start unpacking it as to, okay, what do you actually want your business to look like? What do you want your life to look like? What are you trying to build? And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we can stop looking at our competitors. We can stop looking at all these shiny objects and adding this CRM and stuff. And sometimes we find as well, it might be that they have this dream of doing 4 days a week in 5 years' time. And we're like, but you're not going to get to year 5 and go, oh, it's the 6th year we get to do 4 days now. You have to start becoming that person ahead of it. But
that's good. But you're helping them to see the thing that they're really wanting to go for without being distracted by all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then basically work backwards from there. So probably much like what you're doing in the personal space.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Build your business before you build your house, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Shit, Kiwis won't like that.
No.
Oh, we'll flip it. We'll invert it then.
The business will always pay for the house, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you get it going
That's
right.
what my nana said.
Yeah.
Your business will pay for the house, but the house won't pay for your business.
There you go.
Cheers to Mikey's nana. This podcast is sponsored by her. If you want to try her home cooking. So then a couple of things that we've been speaking about, and we thought, right, who can we get to join us on this long-form conversation on something that is blowing up massively at the moment. Bitcoin has kind of exploded again, and we thought, let's sit down and just explore what that looks like. So what is Bitcoin to start with?
One of the versions, and this is an old version, but one of the versions would be it's digital money for the digital world. Bitcoin has probably been one of those things that has shown us what it is rather than behaved in a way that we wanted it to be. And if you go way back, 2008, 2009, I think it was, when this fictional character, Satoshi Nakamoto, wrote this white paper, which basically was the whole thing. The idea was that it was an electronic peer-to-peer cash system. So the idea was that we would be able to exchange a form of money over the internet without any intermediaries. And it does do that. That's exactly what it does. But it seems like it's taken on a bit of a life of its own, because effectively this code that I just imagine this code just hangs in the universe. This blockchain called Bitcoin is just hanging on the internet there, and it exists. It's out there in the wild. Anyone can access it. And it's being kept alive because of aligned interests that want to see it alive, but not because of some shadowy character inside a central bank, but because it's in everybody's best interest that it succeeds. And so it's this perfect picture of game theory where it has to be given away and has to be free for it to succeed, and everybody's incentivized for it to be successful. So yeah, Bitcoin is a slice of digital scarcity that you can own. It's financial energy. I think that probably sounds like a little bit like Michael Saylor, but it is financialized energy. Yeah, it really is. So you can convert the sun into financial energy as well, which is so cool. Like there's so many different ways that you can look at Bitcoin, but the main thing is that whatever you think it is, our understanding of it will change and evolve over time.
And how we use it will probably change and evolve to suit how we want it to operate for us. Yeah.
It might be a social media network.
Yeah.
It might be a communications platform, media platform. could be a political structure. It could be where all value is interchanged in the future. It could be the base layer of a new financial system.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing. I think to me, from outside looking in, it looks like it's taking over the store of value thing. At any time of its history, if you bought the worst period, as in just before it crashed and dollar cost averaged in, if you stay in for 4 years, you're going to be fine by the looks of the price and stuff like that.
Clip that out as financial advice, please.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, I think, in this day and age now, there's still a lot of misunderstanding around inflation, but people know of it a lot. And this scarcity versus unlimited thing is wild to me. It's wild that you can have some Bitcoin in your phone and even just denominate it in New Zealand dollars if you want, whatever wallet you're using or app, and then just transfer it to someone else at 10 p.m. on a Sunday, and they get the full amount, and there was no trusted third party involved in it. And it's not going to lose its value if you leave it in that wallet. If you put $5 under your bed in 20 years, that will be literally like the value of 10 cents. We all know this because we all remember buying lollies for $1 back in the day, and now if you go and buy lollies now, they're $10. But the Bitcoin won't. That blows my mind, eh?
Your bed might be there in 10 years, but you might lose your digital wallet if you're not careful, right?
Yeah,
that's the difference. But
you can remember some words in your head.
So a couple of things that not everyone would understand, but you talk about scarcity versus never ending.
Unlimited.
Yeah, unlimited. Yeah. So scarcity comes from there is a limited amount of these Bitcoin that there can be. New Zealand dollars, any other currency, it can just keep being created and put into supply.
And that's the fiat word is thrown out there quite a bit, right? And I know probably took me at least one episode of listening to somebody else's podcast to figure out what does fiat mean?
Yeah.
A car or something? But it means by decree, right? So it's when a government and central bank and their union together by decree say that one party creates the money and the other party, the government, forces you to use it. And that is fiat currency. It doesn't have value outside of that government enforcement, basically, whereas sound money or hard money, like Bitcoin, gold, even silver to an extent, they don't necessarily have unlimited new supply coming online, but it's hard to get that supply out of the ground, as in precious metals. And with Bitcoin, we have the halving coming up in probably about a month or so, which means that the amount of new Bitcoin that is being created drops in half again, and eventually that just goes to zero. I think in 2045 or something like that, right?
So then there'll be no more new minted Bitcoin.
Correct.
Yeah. How do we know that we don't get to that date and then there's like a surprise?
Math,
we
baby.
found some more?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's math.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's a possibility that Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know who he is, right?
No.
Or her, or them. And so maybe they come out of the woodwork. I think there's 4 million Bitcoin on that wallet.
Yeah.
Right? So some of it's been lost. It'll be lost forever, right? Because if you lose Bitcoin, it's gone. There's no 0800 number.
Yeah, I lost some of mine in Vegas, and Celsius.
Did you lose on Celsius?
Oh, same here. Yeah, I lost some in Celsius. And the rest of it in a boating accident, of course.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you my Vegas story later on. It's expensive. Right. Okay, so fiat by decree. Because one thing I'd written down here is, Mike was just saying before, it's a little bit of that store of value piece, right? So I think more people are learning that our money's becoming worth less, and so people are chasing something that's going to hold value, and Bitcoin is being seen as that because more people have learned about inflation probably in our generation in the last 3 years than ever before. Also, then you have the people who are saying, oh, where can you get a 7% return, or what's the point even investing, because what's money going to be worth in the future anyway? I think it's like a really dangerous mindset that people have picked up somehow, because they're basically encouraging themselves not to invest. When the point of investing or looking for stores of value is to protect the hard work that you've already done, that you've converted into a fiat currency that is basically decreasing in value the moment you get it.
Yeah, you need to, Man, when I start thinking about this, I'm like, I need to trade my cash, everything. Like, this is Shit's
Yeah.
going to zero.
Yeah.
But it's true though, right? Like you're taking something. This is what the great arbitrage is, or this is what investing is. Is you're taking something that's infinite and swapping it for the finite. You're storing your financial energy into these batteries, investments, like what you're saying, right? But you're right. You invert everything. It's not price. It's the value of it. But I guess there's two things going on, right? Like there is changing demand, and as time goes on, some things become more in favor than others, and so you do get pushes in real demand. But it's this inflation that's going on where they're diluting the value of the currency through the credit creation process that distorts everything.
Yeah, it's the distortion, right? Because as those things would change and demands would change for certain different things, that idea would still exist if the money didn't inflate. Like people would still want Netflix over Blockbuster, and that stuff would still occur, and productivity would still happen. But the money, it just distorts so much of the picture that we see in terms of the pricing of everything.
Yeah.
I think the simplest way for people to understand it, or what we're just talking about here, would be if your money wasn't losing value, why do you ever ask for a pay rise? You shouldn't have to. So you wouldn't need to. If things weren't getting more expensive because money was becoming worth less.
Unless you were getting more productive, right? Like you're upskilling yourself, then you'd ask for a pay rise.
I'm more valuable. Yeah, that's
But
the
it's
other
true
side.
though, if you did not get more productive and you didn't increase your skill, then over time you would still, if the money didn't inflate, everything around you would slowly get cheaper.
Yeah, if you're still doing the exact same job from 4 years ago, the exact same way, nothing's changed at all, why would you expect to be paid more?
You don't need to, because everything's getting cheaper.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing, right? And that's what we've been almost, I hate to say the word we've been programmed, because it makes it sound like there is some evil plot.
Conditioned, maybe.
Yeah,
Or-
conditioned. Over
I
time.
think we probably have been programmed. Like, we are operating on a set of systems and we choose, like, what we install.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole
So
lot of us
say-
go out and vote for more tax. What
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Don't get me started. Yeah. But like, why 3% inflation?
Yeah.
Why is that okay? Because that means that if you're, I'm going to butcher the numbers, but if you're 30, 35 years old, I think by the time you retire, everything that you have is worth exactly half as much already. That's just already hardwired into the system, that you're going to be stolen from 50% of everything that you have right now by the time you retire. So you have to build at least as much to offset that, which means you take risk, and you're chasing more and more and more and more and more, which are all things that cause collateral damage. And so it's not a system that actually encourages stability over the long term.
What you actually think about when you think about that, and so that person losing half of the value of everything they got to go and take risks. They have to become like a professional investor to protect their wealth.
Yeah.
If, let's say, Bitcoin doesn't exist, you've got to go and find the stocks. In your day job, you actually can't be as productive because you're distracted and less focused. I reckon if you didn't have to think about that stuff and all you did was just go and earn your money, store your energy that you spent at work and put it into your bank account, and then it didn't lose value over time, you would be far more productive and free and creative to go and do stuff.
Yeah, I do. I think that one of the biggest issues for New Zealand is that we've got two camps of people. 67% of people own a home or have a mortgage over a home, so they think they own their home, but the bank owns their home and they're on the path to repaying it. They want it to go up. The other third are like, shit, it's running from me. I feel like I'm pedaling. Why can't I? Why is it getting further away from me? And that just creates a giant division, but also pressure, because you're either running to get to the start point of owning a home to start the Kiwi dream. Then you get the Kiwi dream, and then it's, now I need to try and pay this thing off. But it still seems like it's quite hard.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a lot of pressure on everyday Kiwis.
Yeah.
Trying to just navigate that without actually thinking or understanding that that's the pressure that they're feeling.
That's right. That's why you're a socialist up until you buy a home, and then you're a capitalist, right?
Yeah.
You have this bifurcation of your ideals based on what impact it makes for you. Yeah. But there is this sense, though, that we're also running. Like, you guys are self-employed as well. So you know that it's like you have to be on your game. You have to be striving going forward. You can never level off. Like we were talking about this before, right? Like you can't be small. You actually have to always be striving to be bigger, because the entire system is set up so that it favors the bigger guys, right? And so unless you're racing to be big yourself, you're going to be left behind. And that, I think, is a symptom of the fiat system, which is
Crushing, which comes back to like crushing the middle class.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry,
I was just going to say, like, a very quick thing to think about if you're listening to this is that at this stage, like, and with all of this stuff, what's really helped me in my life is getting out of picking a side and whether I agree, disagree, or thinking that something's fair, that house prices are more expensive, or that it's 3% that they're targeting for inflation, and just going, I'm sick of trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong, and just help me understand what's actually happening here, so that then I could go, okay, now that I understand the rules a bit better, I can figure out how I'm going to play the game.
And that's the thing I think that's been missing from financial education. Like, I think financial literacy is good, and that's been picking up massively, and that's awesome. But without a willingness to talk about the rules of the game and the fact that the rules of the game have in fact changed, that's not a conspiracy theory to say that, then we don't see things accurately as they really are. We're trying to impose our own, like what you're saying.
Or we're trying to have the game the way we want it to be.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works in the NRL and the Super 15, nothing. They don't say, oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, we'll change the rule just for your team back to last year because they worked really well for you. They're like, well, sorry, the game's evolved, the rules have changed. You either play or you're going to get pinged and you're not going to win the games. And that's kind of what happens with all things educational, because it's constantly changing economic-wise. Economy-wise,
Yeah.
Going back to the difficulty thing, I wrote down some like calculations last night while I was lying in bed thinking about this. Like a middle-class young couple going through at the moment. And I just did some general numbers off the stuff that I've got from data that I have. And it's basically like you've saved up and you've bought a home. So you've got a 750K loan, right? 25-year term, 6.75% rates. It's just over $5,000 a month. Housing rates, $220 a month. Power and water, $185 a month. Contents insurance, $25 per month. House, fire, and general insurance, $140 a month. Life insurance, $350 a month, and that can be plus or minus either way. Car costs, you got two of them, so you're running $800 a month for fuel and charging in your case.
Yeah, both of us, mate. Come on, mate. You're outnumbered here.
I am. Car insurance, if you've got full cover and you're doing the right thing, like your life insurance, you're probably paying $175 a month. Internet, $90. Gym, $100. Food, $12.50. Christmas, you're probably going to be $2,000 to $3,000, so it's $200 a month. Entertainment, $400 a month. You're almost touching $10,000 a month
of outgoings.
So
you need $180,000 PAYE salary.
I was just about to say.
Sorry, yeah,
that's good. Yeah,
the average Auckland household income's $159K gross.
Household, wow.
So if we go right, these people are, early 30s and they're banging out $285K incomes. They've got $1,200 a month left over.
Sheesh.
And that's a 750 mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So that means depending on when they purchased, they don't even have the average home.
Yeah, exactly. So how are those people meant to have a family?
Well, mate, what I learnt doing the podcast with Professor Paul Spoonley the other day is they're not. And we are not replenishing our population. So
but it's
we need
not,
about a 2-point-something
birth
rate.
Did he understand that it's because of the money?
I don't think they really like to take sides of that.
Fix the money, fix the world.
Yeah. Like that person, they're probably like really hardworking young couple. They've got into their house. They've done the right thing. They've effectively tried to copy mum and dad.
Yeah.
They can't have kids because they've got $1,200 a month left over and daycare's $2,000.
Yeah.
They didn't have a slower inflation pace, but they had a lower baseline that it was starting from, right?
Yeah.
So if you take, like I always go right back to, say, 1971, when Nixon took the US dollar fully off the gold standard. That's when this all started to get really unhinged.
It is.
And that's when we had a real big push for equal rights, right? Funnily enough, let's have women in the workforce now. It's actually also true. It's
just needed two incomes, the reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's been getting harder and harder since then. And, we had I think our generation of parents would have been talking about how they paid 18% on their mortgages, but their mortgages were $60,000.
Yeah.
And so it can only go so far before there has to be some sort of event, which could be a currency reset. That's probably going a little bit too far, but there is a natural. You can only fold a bit of paper in half so many times, and so there has to be an end state where things reach a point of no like it's terminal velocity or it's resistance.
Yeah.
I still think we've got a little way to go before we get there, but
Yeah.
it's a system that is in decline, and I think the interest rates eventually trending to zero, which is what I believe we'll still see. That's a sign and symptom of the end of the system. That's what has to
Yeah,
happen.
we're going to snail along the bottom of that, aren't we?
I think so. We might bounce along.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm still feeling pretty positive that will return. Yeah.
But going back to Darcy, what you're saying about we could see the end of the system as such, or some sort of debt jubilee maybe, or currency reset. That's people are just trying to understand what inflation means. What do you mean? Like, what's going to happen with a money reset? How does that work?
Yeah, and there are a couple of thoughts around this, and so I think it's probably important to point out from the outset that the likelihood of some sort of currency reset thing is relatively low. Maybe it's higher the longer you go out in the time frame, and how it actually all plays out would also be quite like who really knows how that would actually work, and whether it would be a net benefit on the everyday person or not. Bit of a question mark on that too. But you kind of have there's a few voices out there. I had Clive Thompson on my podcast recently, and that's exactly what we talked about: debt jubilee and the currency reset, and how you would invest through that, and how it would potentially look. But then go back even further. I had a conversation with a fellow by the name of Jeff Booth, and he's kind of, you know who Jeff Booth is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy, right?
What a dude.
Yeah, and so he kind of has a full, not too dissimilar to, say, Lynn Alden and perhaps a couple others. Raoul Paul would be probably in this camp where they would believe in this narrative of this coming age of technological abundance, which is, you know, technology, AI, robotics, energy, mix them all together, and you have infinitely lower cost of production, which means GDP goes infinitely higher, and effectively we have deflation, which is exactly what we want. And that's kind of what's naturally already happening, yet the money printers fill in the gap. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, of course, but that's one school of thought. Where
Deflation being prices are going down.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
everything's getting cheaper.
so our money is worth more.
Yeah.
So that side goes up rather than the other side. And there's that, which I believe in that. I can see that happening. I just don't know what the time frame is on that.
It's so hard to guess timeframes around the development of AI and robotics. Like, it's sometimes you see things and it's happening so fast, and you're like, wow, I only saw like this version of this 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And then I get to work and I'm like, I can barely use any of this shit to make my day better.
It's the already, but it's not yet.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's a hard one to wrap your head around.
You can't, but you know it's happening. And
For
you know
sure.
it's not a linear scale, so you kind of have to be prepared, but also cautious. So there is that abundance headspace that I much prefer to be in because it's a happy place. And then there's this other side where there's a whole bunch, you know, you call them doomers if you want, but there's a lot more people that would be kind of thinking that there's going to be a financial crisis and it's all going to explode and end in a horrible ball of flame and all that sort of stuff. And
That will come with war and yeah.
And like, I'm not going to suggest that that's not a possibility, but this Clive Thompson fella that I caught up with recently on the podcast, he was kind of right in the middle, which I thought was quite nice and refreshing, where somebody could piece together these things like central bank issued digital currencies and changing geopolitics, technological trends, and the like decreasing value of our currency, and stitch it all together and basically describe a scenario where a new currency will come into existence, which will still be centralized, central bank issued digital currencies, which is like just another manifestation of fiat currency, but in a new digital form, which means it can be programmed. So you can now program the weight of the money rather than the quantity. That's how I think about it. In other words, it's got a qualitative and quantitative characteristic. You can spend it on fuel this week, but next week you can't. You have to spend it on spam, like, you know, the meat.
Food.
Yeah.
Sounds horrific to me.
Yeah. So there's
It's like
control.
totalitarian control.
Yeah, it's a totalitarian's wet dream is what that is.
Yeah.
You control the money, you literally can control the world. But the flip side is that if the new world is digital and we want to have some form of a government to help organize it, we kind of need to allow that government to be equipped to do it. So you can kind of see both sides here of, hey, if they abuse that power, and man, chances are they will.
Mm.
We're not going to probably come out a winner. But on the other side, you kind of don't want a situation where it's anarchy either. And so I don't know how to navigate that. But yeah, so he was kind of describing a situation where CBDCs become the new currency, and the old wealth, which is denominated in the old fiat currency, can slowly move into the new wealth, but there'll be a throttle on it, and some of it won't get through. And so the idea is that governments will become so indebted that the only way out is to basically kill the currency. And so the currency now is worth zero. So you might have $34 trillion worth of public debt, but it doesn't matter. It's worth zero.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's value is this new currency now that's created. And we all have a certain amount of that new currency to get started. And some people, maybe, the favored people perhaps, were able to translate some of their currency in advance. But if you don't, this is where my kind of 80-20 zombie apocalypse portfolio comes in. You kind of want to have a backup plan to ensure that you have another pathway to ensure that you're wealthy for this new world. And so that's kind of like the podcast, right? That I'm passionate about, is that building new wealth for the new world is how to build that so that if things don't go the way we want it to, you can still get there. But yeah, so the currency reset thing is, again, I don't think that's something that we would need to worry about right now.
Yeah, right now, but
I just have like this weird feeling after like how much effort I put into learning about economics, and I used to really like gold, and then now I like the idea of Bitcoin, and when what happened through the pandemic, and basically saying like shut your business down and all of this kind of stuff, and what happened around the world and other places, freezing bank accounts in Canada, like this wild stuff. At 33 years old, I have very little doubt in my mind that something wild doesn't happen before I die, if I make it to like 75 or 80 or whatever.
Do you feel like that is like a common belief?
Nah, probably. I think learning about Bitcoin, unfortunately, made me dig into how the system works and learn about it more. And then I probably, when I see stuff now, I'm like, thanks, inflation.
Right.
Thanks for broken money. Thanks, central bank. And I'm like, like the cost of that crime is because they, this sounds weird to people who don't know, but like it's because like social welfare has been fed into that person with broken money, and they still can't afford anything for like 20 years or multiple generations. And it comes from like unwound it all, like bad government and policy, but literally what allows it is printing money and financing debt. So like, I don't see how I make it to 75 without something like that happening.
I mean, this sounds bad, but we're in an economic time now where I think people are wanting to learn because things feel different, they look different, they're strange, they're hard.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, what the hell is going on here? People are asking questions they've never had to.
And it probably did start around about 5 years-ish ago, like 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
I think that was the beginning of a grassroots movement, kind of not too dissimilar to what would have happened in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
Where this awakening of, whoa, maybe fighting wars actually isn't good. And maybe governments sometimes do things that are against our best interests. That can't be right, but maybe they do sometimes. And so there is a little bit of this that seems to be spiking right now. And at the moment, it's grassroots, but like most grassroots movements, it often will get hijacked by these crazy things on the left and the right. And then all of a sudden,
populism,
it
gets...
But ultimately,
it's moved out of the center, man.
Yeah, but that's ultimately why I think if you can equip some people with a form of sound money like Bitcoin, you've given them an escape hatch and you've given them a way to be immune from some of those things, which will allow them to speak up. And so people are becoming more bold as they don't have these financial disincentives to speak out. And that's why I think it's quite cool when you discover people that have either nothing to lose or everything to lose, but they don't care anymore because that they own a form of different wealth, and they speak out. And the more people like that on the team that we get, the better it is, because then, well, we get a revolution.
It's pretty interesting. I think in terms of the currency thing and then interest rates trending back to zero, I reckon the true tell of where we're going to go with that is if the US Fed cuts rates because of the debt prior to inflation being under control. If that occurs, that is your biggest tell that they don't really care about, well, we know they don't care about the sort of public and the value of your money and stuff, but basically that they can't stop this train.
That's right.
And are you going to see any government rein in their spending? No.
So is that based on their debt bill with the interest they're going to have to pay is going to be so much that they'll be backed into a corner to go, well, we told you that we raised interest rates to sort out inflation. We haven't been able to. The numbers don't lie, but they'll give us a new narrative of we're dropping the rates because X,
The
Y, Z.
economy's tough.
Yeah.
Should we quickly simplify and unpack that? So the federal government in the US has 34 trillion, more or less, worth of debt, right? And then just like you and I or whoever with a mortgage, you need an income to service that. Their income is tax. Yeah, we won't go too detailed, but yeah, they don't really do that. But so the interest rates on that debt is increasing, just like our mortgages have. And we've got inflation around because we printed too much money and too much credit came into the system. Now, this inflation is still a problem. It is not back within target range in pretty much any country. If the government behind closed doors goes and says to the central bank, the Federal Reserve, hey, we don't have enough tax receipts coming in. Our income's not up to scratch. We're not going to be able to make payments on the interest only of this 34 trillion. We need you to do something. We won't see that conversation. They will lower interest rates at the Federal Reserve, and then the government gets to refinance that debt, which is like you and I moving banks for a better rate. And then basically they go, cool, the next payment's lower now. We can keep this ball rolling. But basically it means that credit's more available because interest rates have come down.
Yeah.
So that's where we're headed.
And the interesting thing about that, and this is where central bank issued digital currencies can actually help in a weird way, is that they can be used to allow the government to have access to cheap money while we have access to more expensive money. And so indirectly, we pay a tax through the higher cost of money that we have to pay so that the government can lower their interest costs.
That's basically yield curve control for the public sector.
Yeah. Well, you have been orange-pilled very well, Mikey. Well done. I'm impressed.
Wow. So little old Luke over here finally buys the Kiwi dream, gets a big mortgage, and then
they jack rates on you.
Yeah.
Well, that still might be the best strategy. We don't know, right?
Yeah,
It depends
yeah.
on what. Like, I still believe that leverage property trade plus Bitcoin is the ultimate.
Same.
strategy.
I've like when I talk to someone who's like a hardcore Bitcoiner and they think that my job is disgusting. And I'm like, well, technically I'm taking out short contracts on the New Zealand dollar secured against scarce land.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
perfect.
I mean, it maybe in some people's minds, it's not as pure in terms of scarcity as Bitcoin, but provides you somewhere to live at the same time. And yeah, sure, you're going to have volatility. We've seen volatility in prices thanks to non-free market movements of interest rates and things like that over the last couple of years. But if you're doing something on 20 years, I can't see how the system doesn't allow it to be a storehold of wealth.
Yeah. And why not? Like, why can't you have multiple paradigms running concurrently? Why can't you be a property investor, a business owner, and a Bitcoiner 100%?
Yeah.
And make that work.
And ultimately, like the market is the market is the market. You can't fight the market. And the market in New Zealand is, oh, I don't care anything you're saying. I want to buy a home. Help me buy a home. Okay, great. You help me buy a home? I'll give you money.
Yeah.
Perfect. And everyone's like, oh, I can't believe how much the banks make. Can't you? Look at your behavior. Look at everything you do. Look at why you go to work. You know,
You're feeding them. Yeah.
yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
You know, we're like, oh, it's unbelievable. We're getting screwed. Well, yeah, but we're very quick to sign up to it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And once you understand that these are all just tools, and
right.
as long as you have a clear vision of what you're trying to build, then maybe there's going to be other tools that help us in the future to do it better. As long as you kind of learn how to think, not just what to think, I think you're going to be okay.
how to think. Yeah.
That's the hardest part, though, is actually teaching people
How to
think, because
Yeah.
that's scary. But it's easier when you understand Bitcoin really well, because then you understand it isn't
Yeah.
about protecting your own patch. It's actually about giving.
Yeah, for sure. Value. Yeah, man. Give more than you take, 100%. Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't think it's okay that after getting into the workforce and finding it hard, that it's still really hard after like 10 or 15 years and you haven't got anywhere.
Yeah.
And I reckon the money is a massive cause of that. And that's where people get lost, and because they don't understand that we say money printing, it's not exactly how it works, but basically they don't understand that every dollar in their bank account is losing a micro percentage of its value every day, and it's compounding. And it's very hard to, like, you kind of have to do hundreds of hours of learning to understand how all of that stuff works, because it's so complex.
Yeah.
But I think it's unfair, and we shouldn't really have to do it. Like, should an engineer that makes planes or buses or cars or whatever and designs them actually have to worry about that? Wouldn't you rather he was focused on making sure your car's safe?
Yeah, or that the plane doesn't drop 50 something in the air.
Honestly, when I see this stuff with Boeing, I'm like, money.
And
This is
even-
the money, man. Like, they're lowering trying to protect their margin because the cost of everything goes up,
Yeah.
and they lower the quality of their work. That's how my brain goes instantly now.
You know who Oliver Anthony is?
No.
Or is it Anthony Oliver? I always get confused when there's two double names.
Yeah.
It's like Ricky Bobby. But Oliver Anthony, Richman, north of Richmond. You know, he's this guy that kind of blew up on YouTube writing songs.
That's
about
right. I did see that song. Yeah.
like amazing. Like, you
Yeah,
watch that
yeah,
song
country
and how
singer
he
dude.
performs it with passion. Like, he gets it.
Yeah.
100% gets
Yeah.
it. And it's that angst, which again, it goes back to that grassroots movement. I think that's building up bigger and
Oh,
bigger.
he says in the song, he's like, the US dollar ain't shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's figured it out.
He's figured it out.
Yeah.
But I think that when the masses figure this out all independently, all at the same time, you have a revolution on your hand. It's just a matter of when and what that looks like. And
That's called a bank run.
that's one of the manifestations. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
No, we don't want that. We definitely don't want a bank run.
Let's
That's right. You're going to get in trouble. Aren't you?
let's cycle back then to Bitcoin and why I think we've covered to a degree what might be happening out there in terms of why people are, to use the term, waking up to maybe it's okay to buy some Bitcoin, or I want to do that. I want to learn more about it. I want to explore it. And a couple of things. So I saw a stat the other day that 97% of people who own Bitcoin at the time of watching this clip are in a profit. Because they'd the price had just continued to increase. So it's very unlikely that wherever you'd brought in, you would be underwater.
It's like short-term fluffy headlines again, man. Like, it doesn't matter either way.
And that's, I guess, what by the time this goes to air or people watch it,
It might be 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or it might be 90%.
yeah, or it could have halved, in terms of its value. You just don't know because it is so volatile. But one of the things that, because I brought some of this back in, I can't remember, maybe like 4 years ago now, but I have probably more of a marketing brain than a financial brain. And very simply, I just saw more people talking about it. And what I've learned through my career is the more attention something gets, normally the price goes up. And I thought, I'm going to get in this before more people start talking about it. And I noticed that more Kiwis weren't yet talking about it. So I just got some to then be able to learn something and see.
Then everyone started talking about Celsius.
I got carried away.
Sometimes it's a good strategy. Sometimes it's not.
I'm like, you can lend it out.
Effectively, you bought the start of the bubble because
Yeah.
you could see the people rushing into this.
Yeah. I'm
Mania.
like, this is interesting. Something's happening here. I want to figure out how this even works in terms of how do you actually buy it? Where do you store it? Just so that I could learn. Much like when I was a 16-year-old lad and I finally saved some money, I'm like, I want to buy some Auckland Airport shares. How does that work? I heard you could buy shares in Auckland Airport. And so then I had to go on the journey of how do you do that? And you can't even do that at 16. I think you have to be 18. You get your parents' consent.
Yeah.
But same thing. I get inquisitive. I think it's like anything. The more you step into it, then you realize like, wow, there's people talking about it. There's people making a living out of this. There's people, doing podcasts on it, and there's people sending it around the world. There's some guy who's going to try and put his whole entire country on Bitcoin, and you open your eyes to it. And I think a lot of Kiwis probably still haven't actually stepped through the orange gates just to have a look and go, what's going on back here?
Yeah. Why do you think that is, though? Like, I'd be curious, just from your perspective, because you'd have quite a good understanding probably of like say business owners and also a younger generation than perhaps what I would see. Why do you think New Zealanders in particular aren't awake to not just the Bitcoin piece, but awake to the reality that there might be change?
50 years of recency bias?
Bang. Yeah, I guess what I've found is really interesting recently with this last crank of Bitcoin is that the homeowners are really quiet Because how could you be into it? Because you wouldn't take that risk. You would be given advice, do not. The best investment for you is to pay down your mortgage, which historically makes a lot of sense, right? And so I think that's probably a big contributor to it. Again, we want to buy a home, then once we own it, we just want to see it increase in value. So people will go and check their homes.co.nz, I'd imagine, and see what's that worth. But these new areas, probably too risky as well, very conservative. If you've had something that's worked so well, i.e. the property market for so long,
It's very hard to shake that.
you got to be a serious risk taker to go, yeah, I'll put some money into that. And I think it's the same thing with,
Or do better at how to think.
yeah, why don't we see more people investing into businesses, into startups? Why does my client have to pay 18% for an overdraft for their business, a productive asset? But if they want to buy a home, they can get 6%. They can click their fingers and borrow against it. So all of that, I think, is what's ingrained in us, and it makes it very hard to go, you know what, I will go and invest into something.
The curiosity comes first, doesn't it? And it seems like the curiosity, this is my interpretation of it anyway, in New Zealand anyway, it seems like the curiosity isn't strong. It feels like there's a strong desire to know what everyone else is doing, which really is translate that into just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of, I really want to understand how this works. And if there's another story behind this, everyone's too afraid to go off the main track and actually investigate that. And that, I think there's a cultural element in there. And I'm only saying that because I've come from a different perspective and I can say that. So hopefully it doesn't offend anyone, but it feels like we are looking to be told what to do here in New Zealand. And I think that costs us.
Oh, massive. We see it all the time.
Yeah.
Like the amount of people in the last 2 weeks that have been like, hey man, like who'd you buy your crypto with? I'm like, that's just a Google, bro. Like you don't need me to tell you that, man. You just need to, I'm like, there's a podcast on it. There's a New Zealand based company that's doing really well that facilitate all of that. But I think we're so scared to go and find that information for ourselves because a part of us still wants to blame someone if it goes wrong. You told me to use them. You told me to buy that. Not my fault. I'm still good. You know, like you've done this to me. Blame, excuse, deny. And we love to live down there rather than I went out, I researched how to do it, how to buy it. Yeah, it went down in value, but I learned a whole heap of stuff. In the meantime, I learned some new things about money, inflation, the digital currencies and whatnot, and I banked it and I can move on. So
that's the hardest part, to be honest. Like even in my own practice, providing financial advice to people, because I do it effectively for DIY people, for people who want to do it themselves. They're not used to owning their decisions and ultimately executing on their own. Because what you said, I think, is they can't take that responsibility, and it's fear based. I think
that is it's a cultural shift to be able to get over that barrier, man. I think, once I had put some effort into learning about Bitcoin, you end up on the other side of that fence, way the other way. Yeah. I'm like, I want personal responsibility for everything. Like if I do something wrong, I will take the punishment. You know, like, and you end up so sure of things and that any risk is your responsibility and your risk to take. Yeah. That I like being over this side. I prefer it over here, but it's definitely a barrier to cross that. Yeah, it's a different one because there's not many people that like it.
No, and it's hard to stay in both camps, right?
I struggle with
because we still have to live in this world.
Correct. Yeah.
And even then, like you look at the Bitcoin space and there's this tendency, I think, especially as you get more towards the Bitcoin maximalist end of the spectrum, to think that it really is as simple as fix the money, fix the world. But really, my personal belief is that everything that man touches is basically distorted and broken. And whatever we create won't be perfect. This is just an improvement, I think, because we're going back to mathematics.
Yeah.
Rather than we're going back to perfection, right?
Something that actually has an answer rather than, it could be this, it could be that. Yeah.
As well, I think, going back to what Mikey was saying before, if you are a nurse or you are a writer, you're an artist or you're a creative, and you don't have any interest in this stuff, you can't really blame those people, as we said before, for not wanting to learn it, because it probably bores the shit out of you, and you probably think, well, I'm really passionate about helping people heal their wounds, and I just want to go and do that for 40 hours. Why do I have to understand this stuff over there? Unfortunately, the rules have changed, probably being forced to a little bit. But equally, we probably then bubble ourselves a little bit because I would imagine that business owners, self-employed people are probably naturally inclined to want to figure things out because no one's there you don't just call the CMO, hey, what's the marketing strategy for this? Like, there's no one there. You have to figure it out. And same with engineers, statistically more likely to be wealthier, I believe, or be millionaires.
Right. So because problem solvers, right?
Yeah. And they want to figure out, okay, how do things work? And they can probably get to the conclusion of this is good to be involved in or not because they can figure out how something works. Whereas a lot of us don't actually get taught to figure out how things work.
If I'm hearing you correctly, there will be some people that don't feel like they should have to figure this out, and it doesn't seem fair that they should have to. And then there'll be others that will really do a good job of figuring it out. And I think there'll be value there. There'll be value in solving that problem. And I think there'll be some people that will solve the problem for the nurse who, or for the counselor who can't figure out how to align the incentives.
Yeah, the people that do the group that do a really good job of figuring it out, there'll just be someone in that group that is capable of articulating it well enough so it's easy to understand. Because I can't. When someone asks me about it, I'm like, have you got 3 weeks? Because I've got a long story for you. But like these super clever high IQ people that are very articulate, someone will be able to tell a good story about it. And luckily, Number Go Up does a fair bit of work for it. And then if you're a tourist, you end up staying around.
It's interesting you talk about the strategy, right? So, I brought in chunks and then I basically stopped buying and it kind of peaked out. And then the way I DCA'd in, I was probably about break even. But in my mind, I thought that we would get back over these all-time highs and stuff probably in 2 to 3 years. And I thought the first time it started cranking, maybe it was 2021, that it was cranking and that everyone had figured it out and maybe this thing was there was something here. Yeah. But I realized this is still pretty early on and there's still heaps of things that could go wrong or people that need to buy into it as such. And so I kept some of that and left it there. But I started getting myself ready for what am I going to do when it gets back to all-time highs? Because I'm definitely going to be in a profit. Yeah, do I? But it doesn't feel that exciting this time. The first one was like, oh, this is pretty crazy. So then I started asking myself, okay.
Now it's become a savings tool for you.
Yeah, and now
it's not an investment anymore.
Yes,
yeah, so you did your 4 years, man.
Yeah, so I've had it over, and then last year in May, I'm basically like, I know I should have more of this in my mind if I'm right. So like, why am I not buying it? So I just set up a recurring buy, and basically that's gone up with the market. So I'm not heavily, but I'd be well profitable if I were to clear it all. Then I get smacked at 39% in tax. Because I'm in the top tax bracket. So then you're like, well, do you want to sell? So you start thinking about all these things before it even happens. But
you had an interesting take on that, Mikey. Like you implied almost that will change at some stage.
So we saw this in COVID, right? Although we've had these numbers are masked by the immigration of people coming into the country, we have seen record people leave. Basically from 2022, even in 2021, actually, and that was while the economy was ripping and interest rates were low and business felt good. We saw people getting sick of this lockdown, and they might have been in a sector where it was tough, and that's an example of greener pastures, or at least believing there are, and going somewhere else to get treated better. So what will happen over time, well, a theory we can talk about, is you can see this starting to happen in El Salvador right now because they made Bitcoin legal tender, right? And their GDP is 7%, their crime's down because he's arguably a dictator or whatever, but basically he's cleaned the place up. And there'll be other countries that you'll be able to go to that won't tax you on your Bitcoin. And if you've got a lot of your net worth, and let's say it does go crazy and you pile in and you don't diversify or whatever, if you've got 40 million bucks or something stupid, there is no way that you are going to waste 39% of that. by staying in the country you're in when you can fly somewhere where you get treated better. And just, it will probably take, in time, it will probably take a few people actually doing that, so there's evidence that it's happening and being talked about. But it won't take that many for the people that run the country and lead us to realize that valuable people are leaving and there is brain drain in a sector that they do not want it to happen in.
Yeah, there was a good story of a younger dude in the gaming space who basically did exactly that through the last bull run, where he realised what he was going to have to pay in tax, and so he was like, okay, well, I'll become a non-tax resident and I will leave.
See ya.
Yeah, I will leave New Zealand. I don't need to be here to do this, but what they are capable of, the country probably needs them there.
If the politicians do care about you, and they're closer than like most people think, you can talk to them, like you'll bump into them now and then. If they truly do have their country's people's best interests at heart, they will remove it. Because not only does that allow your people to be wealthier and better off, it will bring other people here. And there'll be tech people in the States that'll be like, that'll have like their net worth in Bitcoin, and they'll be like, oh man, we can go operate in New Zealand. You know,
have you read The Sovereign Individual?
No.
So read that, because that's exactly what that's about, right? It's kind of like about the death
like
of the nation
country
state.
game theory.
Yeah. So, but what you're saying makes sense, but it also kind of forces you to ask several questions. One of them would be, do politicians really have our best interests in heart? Perhaps that would be a good question to consider, but also,
Perhaps.
but also, like, is there an incentive? Not necessarily. Is there an incentive to make sure that we aren't wealthy as individuals? Because I think that
It
is
feels
what this
like
is touching on.
Like it feels like that, plus the central banks and how they've basically decimated fiat over the last 100 years or whatever. It feels like that. Once you understand it, it's like, oh, why would they do this?
Like, when government and central banks are so close, why do they even need to tax?
Yeah. And then it's like, yeah, I mean, I said on the last podcast, like it's not just, like, I just disagree with income tax. I just don't know why your income should be taxed. Like, you tax everything else. You tax you buy a house and you own the land and you're on the title, and then you pay tax once a quarter to a council.
Call it rates, mate, to trick
Rates.
you.
Like, it's insane. And then everything you buy has a goods and services sales tax on it. Like, literally there is tax everywhere, and the government still takes 39% of your income, but they're not a 39% business partner.
I'm only staying quiet because I don't want to get audited this year.
Yeah.
But no, you can see what I mean, though. I just think that, some countries will take on these people.
Yeah.
And
They'll market to us as well. It's much like Australia at the moment. Like, hey, police force, you want to come work over here? We'll treat you better.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like, it will become a mechanism. But also, I was going to ask, what about if the government ends up buying Bitcoin?
Well, that would be very much so in favor of us.
So that's almost an admission of failure in a sense. So they have to be careful, because that's immediately going against the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, for example, right? Like, or if you're talking about the government, but really it would be central bank, right? So if the central bank started holding Bitcoin on its balance sheet.
But a lot of central banks around the world hold gold for similar types of reasons.
But they've always done that in the past. So that's kind of...
it's not frowned upon, I guess, and not an admission because...
And all they're doing is they're kind of rejoining that line of where they were in the past.
Yeah.
Because they kind of let that go. But that's... So I
think they'll be forced to.
Because it's like, let's say you privately custody your own Bitcoin, and then somehow that forms the base layer of a new financial system, perhaps, because some of your currency units with the bank are redeemable, or with the central bank is redeemable for Bitcoin and or gold. Like, that would be an interesting world.
It would be. Yeah.
I don't know how to understand that world, by the way. And I think this is probably why a lot of people struggle with, say, Austrian economics or that whole view of hard money, because it does severely restrict the powers of the state, and they just can't get their heads around that.
Yeah.
Like, they can't imagine the state becoming less and less over time. How could that ever work? And that's why.
That the printing of money and the growth of the state is what's conditioned us to believe that must keep going.
Yeah, and we need the state to help us.
Yeah, it's
which is
crazy.
pretty convenient.
Yeah, and then you go and vote for the one that gives you the most. Like, what a system. It's wild.
Imagine if the New Zealand Super Fund came out and said, hey, we actually invested the whole thing in Bitcoin when it was 40,000 Kiwi. It's now tripled. We're taking it out and we've now secured the pension for another...
Yeah, forever, basically.
Yeah. But also, I thought during lockdown, when oil was ridiculously cheap, I was like, oh, someone smart at a government level will probably be buying heaps of oil for us.
Yeah,
so that,
$23, right? Just fill up the tanks.
Yeah, so that, and now when we get shafted with the high oil prices, it's like, fuck it, is no one smart enough to figure out, like, hey, we could have saved Kiwis a bit of this pain by getting heaps of it.
Stockpiling.
Yeah. Well, where's the incentive to save Kiwis money or reduce the loss? Like,
It's way easier just to raise taxes, man.
When inflation started getting bad, I'm going around my house being like, right, what's all the stuff that I always buy? I need more coconut milk. Let's stock up on coconut milk because I'm like, I know that's
you were prepping for hyperinflation.
I'm like, I know that $5 is going to become $7.
Yeah.
And then you're like, there's only so much of this I can really store in the house. And then it comes back online, obviously, and it is $7. But
and your bag of flour is full of weevils. That's what I thought.
Going back to the like Bitcoin as hope piece, for instance, I then started doing a thought experiment in my head of, okay, it's being unfair on those people who say they have $100 or $200 of of Bitcoin, because I guess to give that some context, what I've noticed is as I've earned more and invested more, saved more, I've then realized my life hasn't changed dramatically like I think is sort of marketed to us in the movies and what we think our lives might be like when we start doing a lot better. You realize that you start giving a bit more, but you kind of rebalance back to actually I can pay for everything, cool. I can now pay for insurances that I couldn't afford before. I don't worry about my cam belt breaking. Oh, I've got to go to the dentist, it's $600. Sweet, is what it is. Get in there fast. And I appreciate that can sound like really rude to some of the listeners, but that's where you start to get to, and then you realize you have excess money and you're like, I've got to deploy this and I've got to do something with it. And you start deploying it, but you keep producing, so money's coming in, and then Bitcoin doubles and you're like, well, my life still hasn't really changed because
That's because you haven't got freedom money yet.
Yeah. And so I was trying to think, okay, if it 200x'd, would I, so then I'm like timesing out what my current portfolio is to, and I'm like, oh yeah, shit, that is pretty life changing. I'm like, maybe I would buy this apartment.
But have you done like the numbers though in terms of 25% per annum?
Compounded.
Yeah, compounded.
Wow,
over,
those numbers are wild.
Yeah. Like I wish I could remember this. Because I did a simple calculation. It was like $56 million.
Yeah, so I did one for, like, I went and looked at some numbers, and if I was just going to, like, dollar cost average, I think it was $7,500 a month. It might have been $10,000 a month, which it's not an indication of anything. It was just a number I picked.
Using a round figure.
Yeah. And it was like 20 years was 50 million.
Wow. If that compounds at 25% over the...
It's wild.
Yeah. And that's
So
like a low rate.
Exactly.
We don't have a very big time frame, and the past isn't a
exactly.
Guarantee of the
that is
future.
that is like the worst year recorded. An
Why?
average of 4 years on Bitcoin.
What's that saying that you said to me the other day about, I think you read it somewhere, Kiwis buy property.
Oh, yeah. Bitcoiners buy Bitcoin because they know what's happening with the money.
Yes.
Property people buy property because they don't know what's happening with the money.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
because every day I can go on Instagram and someone will be like, buy a house was this and now it's worth this. My profit is that. I'm like, that is not a profit. You had rates, you had opportunity cost, you had
It's inflation.
the interest.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like or like it was this and then we sold it for this and we didn't even do anything to it. That's amazing. I'm like, is that amazing? Like, think deeper into that when you're at school, when people would say to you, if you want something, you got to work for it. And you're saying, it's real cool. We didn't have to work for anything. And we got this difference. Something's broken there.
So one day my brain was like, why does that occur?
Yeah.
Because I used to think that too. I was like, man, I ended up with
I must have
rental
timed
properties.
this really well.
Yeah. And I was like,
It's all me.
Yeah.
how come I didn't do anything and then the price went up? Like, it's cool because I like money, but
The thing is like going back, I was reminded of this recently with a client who just came out of the blue and just said this to me, and I couldn't. It just really hit me that she said, hey, 15, 20 years ago, I was sitting in your office and you told me that I should go out there and buy the biggest freaking home I could possibly get. And I remember probably saying that to a lot of people, not everyone, but
Age
a lot
for
of people back then.
stage, like, yeah.
Of course, all that sort of stuff, right? But it was because I had a very, very solid conviction back then that I knew that property back then, like 20 years ago, was the Bitcoin in my mind.
For sure.
Because I knew that interest rates would come down, and I knew that the relationship between that and house prices was inverse. And so if interest rates go down over time, prices go up. And so I was very, very bullish on that for the people that I knew could handle it.
Yeah, yeah.
And but that was really controversial advice back then. And now I find that I'm kind of doing it again, but it's different. People kind of understand the property story, but they need to be told the Bitcoin story. It might be something different in the future. I don't know. I think that's what the essence of financial advice is telling people not what things are, but you're kind of telling things how things are, right? So that people can figure it out themselves.
Yeah, I think so. I like giving the power completely 100% to the person and just trying to be like, here's how I understand it. Here are the risks, blah, blah, blah. Lay it all out for you.
Yeah.
Do you want to cross the barrier?
In 2053, the way the property market is going, it is statistics, NZ, I'm pretty sure it's the stat, suspect that basically 1 in 2 people will be renting. So at the moment, I think it's a third of people rent and 2/3 have a home.
Yeah.
So that's going to move to 1 in 2. So 50% of us are going to rent a home and the other half are going to own them. So we're going to have massive division between the two, I'd imagine. But I think at a 50-50 split, the country has to look different. We have to talk different, and there'll be a different wave of people where they'll go, well, you just don't buy a home. Like, why would you do that? At the moment, it's kind of like, you're an idiot if you don't. What are you doing? Are you just renting? You have to literally say to people, no, I'm not just renting. Yeah. I rent this place.
I have to. I lost all my Bitcoin in Celsius.
Yeah, I'm still producing. And I wonder if there'll be a shares generation or a crypto generation. And I guess we haven't even said this whole thing could go to zero as well, right? So there's risk involved in everything. But I wonder if
all of crypto will go to zero. Bitcoin won't. It's a bit different.
Yeah.
Bitcoin, not crypto.
Yeah.
So people will have to be careful what they're pinning their hopes to, because it could all get taken away from them as well. You could log in and it all could be gone. And then what are you going to do?
Not Bitcoin.
But
I know what you mean.
Yeah, these things can happen, right? So think, what are you going to do then if your whole hope's been on, okay, my Bitcoin's going to go to whatever, and then one day you log in. Like, I got screenshots the other day, Coinbase defaulted to zero, and people are like, fuck, my life just blinked, my life just flashed in front of my eyes. So you're then going to have to go back into producer mode, because no one's going to care. All the people that didn't buy it are going to be like, oh, told you that could happen. Well, that's why we didn't get it, I just wonder if we're going to then have a different generation of people that grow up and they will genuinely believe, like, there's no point in buying a home. Like, how does that even happen if only 1 in 2 people do it?
Yeah.
And that no one's role modeled that before me, then
I think you're right.
I'm down an investment path. Who knows?
The awkward reality is that in a fiat-based financial system, we are, when I say we, Generation X and younger, are exit liquidity for boomers.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why I have faith that the can will be kicked further down the road for longer.
With property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of that. So, but what you're saying is right? Like at some stage.
Which means zero interest rates are coming back too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it all fits well.
Because we've got to be able to buy.
We've got to be the ones that got to buy up their stuff at the value that they want, man. Yeah. And the only way we're going to do that is go leverage up.
But you're right. At some stage.
Happened too.
But I think it's immigration that will probably, depending on who the people that come in are.
Yeah.
They have to be the ones that go, actually, I don't need a home. Because I think it's probably too ingrained in our psyche as Kiwis that is the way to live, or it could be a valid way to live. I don't see why not. As long as you have faith in that store of value, why would you have to own your own home?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, you see these stories of like the 60s and 70s, and it was a family of 4, single, like the dad would go work at the factory, or one income could support this whole family, and the mum could look after the kids and all of this type of thing. And now, because the the savings ability has been taken away and the cost of the debt at the moment has got high. I don't think it'll stay that high forever, but this creates what you're talking about. Like that would make half of us can't own a home. We're going to be renting by 2050. But if you have like a beautiful savings technology, it can be reinstated. The difference will be, it might still be 50-50, but I might be renting by choice.
Yeah, true.
Because I've got a better savings account than that piece of land.
Don't have to worry about maintenance. Let the landlord take care of it, which happens to be BlackRock. That's okay.
Yeah.
They own all the Bitcoin anyway.
This is the bit.
I was about to say, maybe the Bitcoiners own all the houses. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, I don't think that. Maybe there does seem to be something that I've seen with people I know that have done well out of Bitcoin, and as soon as they can afford it, they go and buy a freehold home.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You've got to sell back to fiat to get that, right?
Yeah.
So that's just what I worry about.
Well, you don't have to, but at the moment,
Correct. Yeah.
you kinda do.
But given that most Kiwis, when they voted in that, are like, yeah, keep it for sure. $2,000 into 14K, it's not changing anyone's life. Who cares? When it's into 1.4
you're
mil,
right.
It's like, oh, I'm selling this shit.
Yeah.
They don't want it.
I think everybody has a number in their head, whether they're conscious of it or not, that they would sell out for.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Like I've got a number and it's close to my debt. That's more of a milestone now, whereas before that would have been like, sweet, as soon as I can do that, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
And now it's changed as I've,
Yeah, I used
got
to
better goals.
I used to think I'd retire if I made 100K a year, like an income.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been cool for me to see in a type of asset like this blow up, because my level of thinking around investing and stuff is way different to what it used to be like when I was younger. So I guess for some context, I brought A2 milk at 10 cents and sold it for 40 cents and thought, fuck yeah, I'm out at the top here. Like I've nailed this. And then it was 80 cents. I'm like, oh, okay. And then it went to $20 something, right? And that's like funny to look back on and whatnot, but now I see old versions of me in the comments on Instagram like, oh, it's too late to buy Bitcoin. And you're like, how have you come to that conclusion? But we want to tell ourselves things so that we can validate the inaction that we take, or someone that's like, it's too risky. And now I want to understand from those people like, oh, how do you know it's too late? Because it was too late to buy A2 milk at 40 cents.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we were getting out. And then it went to 80. Then it somehow was in the $20 mark. And we're like, okie dokie. Do you want to buy zero shares at $5? I shouldn't say it's funny, but it intrigues me to now watch people and go like, oh, I used to be like that. Like, oh, it's too risky. It's too late.
Yeah. You see it with property as well.
Yeah.
And not know.
It's pretty much any financial market you see that because of our time preference.
And
or
even
even
bias as well, right?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Then I did see a good one was like, oh, it's a bubble. And someone's like, oh, okay, like how come? And they're like, oh, I don't really know. It just seems like it's just the price is way too high. And you're like, okay. But the level of education that we have to then have so much conviction to tell people like, don't do something. It's the top, it's the bottom, it's too risky, it's not too risky. Is phenomenal to watch people have such a heavy opinion on something without really...
Smart people as well, though.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
like 2017, doing a podcast recording with a very, very smart individual who did own Bitcoin and sold it proudly at $4,000 because he made a profit. And he was saying, you got to get out right now. You got to get out. I'd only just gotten in. Come on, man. We got to get some of the action as well.
Yeah.
But now you got to get out.
Yeah, that time preference thing is so interesting to think about. After a while, it gives you, if you learn about Bitcoin, it gives you a hiding in that regard, It just makes you look like an idiot.
Yeah.
And it consistently has, actually. There isn't a time currently, as of like today, that you could have bought Bitcoin and it not give you a hiding. Like it's showing you right now what it does. Hindsight is so helpful in this regard. Like you can go look at like Amazon stocks through the late 90s, early 2000s and the tech crash and all of this stuff. And at the time, it could have been like when you're buying Amazon at the top because you're like, oh, this company's good. It's going to change the world. He's onto something, selling books online. And then you lose 75% of your net worth. That's the same as the person was feeling who bought Bitcoin at the last all-time high and it crashed. But if you look back now, any time in that period would have been a good time to buy.
And you know what the growth rate of Amazon has been over, I think it's 25 years.
Yeah, it would be now.
25%.
Wow.
So I could be wrong on those numbers.
Created,
but
it's basically
it's the same as what we were talking about with Bitcoin before.
It's created multiple billionaires too. Like there's shareholders that became billionaires just out of holding the stock. It's wild to think about. And yeah, time does mitigate. Well, it doesn't remove risk because you never know what the company's going to do. They might be blockbuster.
Yeah.
But if you have a theory and then put it over a period of time and think about it with the timepiece involved, that definitely helps you make decisions.
Yeah, and that's where I guess there's probably another conversation around concentration and diversification.
Yeah, for sure.
Which ties into that whole rebalancing
Diversify, what's that?
Is that a crypto?
It's diversify coin.
Yeah. What's been the most valuable thing for me in getting Bitcoin was then the doors it opened to people who I was then like, oh, I wonder why they've got it. Oh, why is that country looking at doing it? What's this Michael Saylor guy up to?
Yeah, it's wild when you start seeing that.
Yeah, why is this KiwiSaver allowed people to do that? I thought we're not even supposed to talk about it. I thought all the financial advisors are at risk if they talk about it. Now you can put some of your KiwiSaver into it. Hang on, what's changed here?
Yeah.
And that got me just fascinated about more of the stuff because I enjoy it and I'm a sicko.
You're a sicko, yeah.
Yeah.
You're
but it helps
you're a
learn.
sicko in that you want people probably to grow wealth, right? And that's the thing that I find quite interesting is that the people that are often the most vocal about Bitcoin are the ones that genuinely just want people to do well, and they're not using it as a gimmick or something to make them wealthy. Like, I've been talking about this for probably 6 years now. I don't want to say promoting it, but I've been open to it, and I've been openly open about it for 6 years so that people can do their own research and hopefully make a good decision. But I haven't made any money out of that.
Yeah. It's not like you can affiliate sign up to
Easy Crypto? Well, actually, I do. Can I insert it into the show notes of this one as well? But yeah, no, apart from that.
Yeah.
The motivation is fairly pure in terms of like,
Because,
I believe in it and I want other people to actually do their research and believe in it too.
Because if you took New Zealand, you're like, how would you make New Zealand awesome? Every single person in the population would have their own version of what they consider wealth. And like, that would be nice. And then basically no crime. And then leave everyone alone.
Gee, the perfect world, eh?
Yeah. That's what it could create.
It would be like Cryptopia almost.
Well, what a journey. Far out. It's
12:05. It's a big one, eh?
Yeah.
I was only kidding when we said I had 3 hours.
Yeah.
I got to pick up my kids from school, man.
Yeah, you're going to be a bit late. Are they at Bitcoin school? Right, let's get out of here. Darcy, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Cool.
perfect. Well, thank you for tuning in. 5 stars on the way out. If you are watching on YouTube, hello from America, because we probably get some American audience with this one. But please like, subscribe so that we can get the algorithm hissing a little bit. Very new to YouTube, so need people who are watching, need their support to tell the platform that this is good content so that more Kiwis see this stuff as well and we can all learn. Maybe it might not be this episode, but definitely some of the other episodes as well. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next episode.